One of the things that stirred a good bit of conversation from Sunday was the idea or point that God doesn't hear the prayer of lost people except the prayer of repentance or the prayer of saving faith. Admittedly, saying it that way may not have been the best way to say it, because in God's sovereignty, in His own right to be God, He can do what He wants. The point I was trying to make was that access to God is not granted except through Jesus. And so without Jesus, really we have no right to approach God. And the contrast being that those who belong to God, they approach God without fear, without shame, as 1 John teaches very confidently. Those without Jesus, however, can't even approach God. And so, in a very technical sense, they don't have access to God in prayer, except for that prayer in which they come to God through Jesus in repentance and in saving faith, much like Cornelius did, even though his was a little more drawn out. We know in Acts chapter 10 that his prayer to God for the truth is one that God answered. So in that sense, you could say that God heard the prayer of an unbeliever, and yet it was his prayer. His prayer was one seeking God and for saving faith and for the truth. So I think it's still consistent to say that God chooses not to respond to the prayer of unbelievers except in the case of that prayer being one of repentance and for saving faith. A friend of mine came to me after the service, though, and he's always got some neat illustrations. And he illustrated it this way, and I think this is pretty good, especially if you're trying to teach this to your children or lay this concept, this truth out to your family. He just said that, really, Todd, he said, it seems to me that all people have like this spiritual cell phone. And so he said, typically, if you are not a Christian, he said the Bible teaches that that cell phone, so to speak, has one number. And he used the phrase 911. He said you get one call, and it's the call to God to save you. And in repentance and faith, you call out to God. And he said the moment you use that one single call on this quote-unquote cell phone that you're given, he said God hears that, He answers, and then that phone is activated, and then you have this line to God from thereafter, this access to God. He said, but prior to salvation, you really have just one number to call, one call to make. And that might be a little trite in some ways. It is very simple, but I think it contains some real nugget of wisdom that really God holds no obligation. There is no real family responsibility to hear the prayers of those who don't belong to Him, except when they do turn to Him in faith and He makes them His children through adoption. After that, there is this family privilege, this access we have to the Father through Jesus, in which in confident prayer we can approach His throne. I think the point is well made, and I think the truth is still clear that one of the greatest privileges of belonging to God genuinely is that of confident prayer, and it's something that lost people or unbelievers do not experience.